General Hodges, thank you very much for joining us. And I, of course, first of all, want to ask you about security guarantees. This expression that we keep hearing and heard yesterday during the talks with Volodymyr Zelensky and European leaders. So, how do you imagine security guarantees, given that Donald Trump mentions guarantees like Article 5 of NATO? And at the same time, Ukraine is not joining NATO alliance, is, well, not formally protecting Ukraine. How is this supposed to look?
Well, I am concerned that there is so much pressure to get an agreement of some sort, especially pressure from the American president, that an agreement will be reached without getting all the details correctly as to what a security guarantee actually means. I mean, NATO is a security guarantee. There is no other thing that's NATO-like or NATO style except Article 5, which means an armed attack on one should be considered an armed attack on all. So the way the president says it, my president says it, makes it sound like if Ukraine was attacked by Russia, then the United States or UK or France would consider themselves as attacked. I don't think anybody is actually thinking about that. So I would, as a military person, I would ask, okay, what is the mission that you want us to do? What does that mean? Can we shoot back if Russians shoot at us? What are the rules of engagement? So a lot of questions. I would say one last thing. Of course, security guarantee is more than just having troops from UK, France, Germany, US on the ground. It also is using all the economic tools, providing air and missile defense to protect Ukrainian cities from drone and missile attack. These are all things that could be done, as well as investing in Ukraine's defense industry. This also is part of a guarantee.
About money, I will ask you later, but you just mentioned the presence of Western troops, a peacekeeping mission, for example, some Western one or different ones on the territory of Ukraine. And as I understand, Donald Trump does not completely rule out sending an American peacekeeping contingent onto Ukrainian soil. Do you rule out such a scenario? I already hear, for example, critical remarks from members of MAGA movement. How come an American soldier, an American boot on the ground? This is exactly what we didn't want to allow, etc., etc. So, is this even possible?
No, I don't think he's close to it. Of course, it's possible, but he will have a real political problem on his hand that he would have to explain. And of course, midterm elections are coming up next year. And so this will be in his mind and in the mind of his administration as well. I personally would support the idea of American troops being part of some sort of a ceasefire enforcement or security guarantee. I've always thought Ukraine should be in NATO. But the first question will still remain, what is the mission? Let's say the president agrees to American troops being a part of this security agreement. What's their task? Where will they be? What do you want them to do, and what are the rules of engagement? And I think the Kremlin, if they see that troops are out there, but they don't have capability, they don't have the right rules of engagement, then it will not be a credible guarantee. I could imagine the United States providing help in air and missile defense, logistics, intelligence, engineering, a lot of things like this that would be very useful. And I hope the president will agree to do it. But first, and I want to keep emphasizing this, first thing is, what is the mission? What do you want these soldiers to do? What are their rules of engagement?
А согласны ли вы, генерал, с тем, что сейчас речь идет не только...
And do you agree, General, that now it is not only about protecting Ukraine, but also about protecting Europe? At least this is the thesis of many of those European leaders who came yesterday to Washington. Is the security of the European continent guaranteed right now, in your view, considering all the risks that we're seeing? Can we say that the money that Europeans are now spending on defense is enough to guarantee Europe's defense?
So this is a very important question. And I think this is why you saw so many European leaders in Washington yesterday, because they understand that if Ukraine fails, if President Trump turns his back on this situation and takes the Russian side, as he has been doing, then Europe will pay the biggest price. Not only Ukraine, but the rest of Europe. Millions more Ukrainian refugees, disruption of economies and energy and food supplies. All of this would be very destabilizing. And of course, Putin would absorb thousands of Ukrainian soldiers into the Red Army, which would then be emboldened to continue their aggression. So the European leaders know that this is a very serious situation. I was impressed with how unified they were yesterday with President Zelensky. And while on the surface they were very polite and deferential to President Trump, the host, I heard several times people talking about, well, there needs to be a quadrilateral meeting because Europe is involved. That was President Macron. President of the European Commission, von der Leyen, she reminded that there are thousands of Ukrainian children that were kidnapped by Russia that they need to be brought back. The German Bundeskanzler said there should be a ceasefire. So it impressed me, their resolve. Now, of course, speeches and public statements are not a security guarantee any more than a piece of paper is a security guarantee. The real test will be, do they have the capabilities and are they willing to send those capabilities to the right place, whether that's in Ukraine or outside of Ukraine? The combined economies, militaries, defense industries, technologies, and populations of all of Europe, including UK, dwarfs Russia significantly. So yes, they have the capability. Do they have the political will?
Ну, у них есть политическая воля действовать совместно с американцами.
Well, they have the political will, they act together with the Americans, obviously, and maybe even under American leadership. So that's why yesterday such a delegation came to Washington. In particular, there was a proposal, among other things, a specific story about $100 billion that Europeans will spend to purchase to purchase weapons for Ukraine, American weapons for Ukraine. How likely do you think that is? And what does this figure mean? How serious is it? The scale here is very interesting. What, for example, can be bought for $100 billion? How do you assess such a deal?
Well, first of all, I don't know about that number. I always think in terms of capabilities. What capabilities?
This was reported by the Financial Times.
What capabilities are required? And also, I'm sure that President Trump would love to turn this into a big transaction where, European countries and Ukraine are buying, including Ukraine, are buying American-made weapons. But why not use the frozen Russian assets? Use that money to help Ukraine, to allow Ukraine to buy what it needs, as well as to use it for reconstruction. That would be a powerful signal as well.
Но теоретически, что можно...
But theoretically, what can you buy with $100 billion? What is that? Is that enough to defend Ukraine, for example, for a year against Russian attacks?
Well, you can have money, but you have to spend it correctly on what's needed. And of course, the Ukrainian General Staff, they know best what they need. I would imagine part of it would be for air and missile defense. Part of it would be for long range to protect Ukrainian civilians and critical infrastructure. Part of it would be for long range precision weapons that can hit Russian headquarters, Russian transportation, Russian oil and gas infrastructure. Part of it would be to continue modernizing and growing the size of the Ukrainian armed forces, which is needed, of course. 100 billion, that's a lot. That's a lot of money. The U.S. defense budget for a year is about 900 billion, and that's for all that we have. You know, Army, Navy, Air Force, Marines, nuclear, global responsibility. So 100 billion for Ukraine, that's a lot of money.
In conclusion, I would like to ask you about the situation in Donbas. You have been following it carefully from the very beginning of the full-scale invasion, General Hodges. There was a report about a breakthrough of the front near the city of Pokrovsk. How do you assess the situation on the ground right now? And what threats do you see for Ukraine, for Ukrainian cities, for regions?
Well, first of all, I don't believe that there is a big breakthrough happening anywhere. Nothing that is significant that could lead to a collapse. Of course, on a front that is as long as what Ukraine has with Russian forces, as many hundreds of kilometers, there are going to be places where the Russians may achieve a local penetration. But you know, these are few people. These are not massive numbers of troops with vehicles and tanks. It's a very small that the Ukrainians have actually already eliminated most of these. So I think the narrative that's in the public is somehow that Russia is gaining territory and this momentum, but in fact, in the past year, they've only gained 1% more of Ukrainian territory at an enormous cost. And so, yes, it sucks if you're a Ukrainian soldier fighting near Pokrovsk or Kramatorsk or any of these places defending, but the Russians do not have the capability to break through, overrun, and continue moving towards Kyiv or the Dnipro or anything like that. It doesn't exist. And so I think what the Russians are hoping is that the West will get tired and quit, that President Trump will give in. He's so anxious for a deal. The Russians are in trouble. I think they have enough people to keep doing what they're doing for maybe another 12, 14 months. That's it. So my money is still on Ukraine.
And security guarantees, will they be provided in the end or not? Yes or no? In the near future, before the end of August, do you think such a deal is possible?
No.
Нет.
Well, thank you. Thank you for this realistic assessment. That was General Hodges live on Дождь TV channel. See you soon.
В эфире телеканал «Дождь». До скорого.